Sikkim 365 and Baylor Plus have teamed up to bring Baylor fans the ultimate content bundle. You can sign up now for $17.99 a month, a $5 monthly savings, and get instant access to all premium content on both websites. For more information, visit either sikkim365.com or baylorplus.com today. What's up, Baylor family? Welcome into Inside Baylor Sports, the official daily podcast of Baylor Athletics. It's Monday, September 15th, and the Bears are now 2-1 on the season after a 31-3 victory over Air Force on Saturday. We'll dive into Baylor's first Big 12 opponent all throughout this week against Colorado in Boulder on Saturday. But today, Grayson and I will recap Baylor's victory over Air Force and kind of give our thoughts on what this team looks like after 3 home games. Grayson, I know there's a lot to get into with this game, but I think the major storyline here, DeQuan Finn out with an injury, multiple injuries apparently. Sawyer Robertson gets the start. Someone that Baylor fans are pretty familiar with after last year, after he transferred in and started 4 games last year, appeared in 6 total. And he had a really strong outing, completed 75% of his passes for 247 yards, had a touchdown rushing, averaged 10.3 yards per attempt, completed passes to 8 different receivers, including a couple of running backs. And truthfully, he led Baylor to their best offensive performance this year. And I know that can be taken in context considering they played Utah, but they did play Tarleton, best overall yardage production in this game. And truthfully, Grayson, I just felt like he got the ball where it needed to go in an offense that you have to get the ball where it needs to go.
I think the clearest thing to me is he felt more in command of what they were doing offensively than what we've seen in the past. And it's not really trying to knock Finn or whatever it may be. I do want to emphasize the fact that Air Force, we felt very strongly that they weren't very good. And we felt very strongly that the passing game specifically would have a ton of success. We're going to get to the run game, which was fun, but I think this was the area for them to attack. But I think my overall, just kind of watching the game and watching how Sawyer operated, it just feels like he's a better fit for what Baylor is trying to do and what Baylor needs possibly for this season. And, it was interesting because the first drive, was it the first drive of the game or the second drive? He actually had a moment where I was like, oh man, this kind of looks like what was happening to Finn, where he kind of put his head down, didn't look up the field, gets tripped up as he's trying to escape the pocket. But after that drive, he really didn't have any issues like that. He did a great job delivering the football. His first reads were open a lot, I felt like, in this game, which was nice. But he did have moments where he kind of moved to that second read and he processed things, which has been something that we haven't really seen so far this year. So, yeah, I'm with you. I felt like he was very in command, very comfortable. It felt like the receivers were very comfortable as well. And the whole offense just felt like it had another gear to them in this game.
Yeah, I think that first drive was interesting after the block punt. I think that almost there was a script going into this game when Baylor was to get the ball, and that script was kind of tossed out for that first drive because you get the block punt, you have a short yardage, and they immediately take a deep shot to catch on Jackson. Didn't connect, and then it kind of, the whole drive just kind of seemed off. They ended up getting a field goal, but after that drive, even with the fumbles, and we're going to start talking about the slow start in general, but even with the fumbles, they moved the ball consistently with the passing game in the first half. And we had talked about it, there looked to be an opportunity against Air Force. That was kind of the weakness of their defense, the rushing game, potentially kind of a stalemate going. And we thought it might be a stalemate. What's going to happen in this one? We knew Bryson Washington would be back. But truthfully, the offense just found a groove early on. And if it weren't for fumbles, maybe they put up more points in the first half. But I think in general, as I was watching that unfold, I was each opportunity, each possession, each pass that he threw was like, there's a rhythm here. There's something that he is finding here, and he understood what was going on. And that's what we haven't seen this year. And that was very encouraging. And competition aside, we didn't see that flow of the offense against Tarleton, and obviously not against Utah that we saw with DeQuan Finn and what they were doing. I felt that everyone felt much more comfortable with Sawyer running in this. And you hope the best for DeQuan coming back from injury, but I think Baylor's in good hands regardless of what happens.
Right. And there was a calmness to the way Sawyer was playing. Again, just comfortable. And I don't really, the only things that I can think of are the fact that he was in this system with Mike Leach for a while at Mississippi State. He's at Baylor now, back in an offense that he's more comfortable in. And it's just clear that all the throws that he's kind of being asked to make, the ones that are on schedule, he feels very comfortable making those throws because he's been making those type of throws for years now, aside from last year, where he was in a very different offense. But I think that calmness really allowed them to kind of deal with even the slow start, even the turnovers. They just continue to consistently churn out yardage. I felt like they were really able to take advantage of their mismatches because of that. Guys like Ashton Hawkins, he was just running free, it felt like, the whole game. Michael Trigg as well had some moments in there. So again, I feel like all of the weapons kind of were on full display, which is something you love to see. There's maybe a couple guys that we'll talk about that I think will be more involved. But in general, I think Baylor did a good job of, finding their guys and being able to find them in good positions to make plays. And I think a big part of that is because of Sawyer's ability and just how comfortable he is in this offense.
Yeah, so you look back over Sawyer's last 3 games, 2 of those this season, 1 of those against West Virginia to end last year when he got the start after Blake Shapen went out with another injury. But he's completed 38 of 48 passes for 530 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and 1 rushing touchdown. If you look at just his starts, which were this game against Air Force and the West Virginia game, he has had 2 games graded over 90 by Pro Football Focus, which is, not an easy thing to do. There's a lot of guys who never do that in their careers. I think you have to go back to Charlie Brewer, who ever had in consecutive starts for Baylor. And that was in the 2018 season, I believe, not even 2019. And he graded 92.2 against West Virginia to end the year last year. And then on Saturday, 90.1. That's not the end all of all of this. That's not going to be the determining factor of who starts in the next game against Colorado or at any point. But it is a bar that you can kind of measure. And he looked every part of a 90.1 grade in this particular game.
He did. And he had some impressive throws that I think speak to how comfortable he is. Really, honestly, I think his most impressive play was probably the throw to Bryson Washington that ended up, unfortunately, being a fumble. But it was just something so subtle and honestly not that hard. It didn't look that hard, but it is kind of hard. When you're being asked to turn around and roll out and make a throw, but also be calm, understanding that you're probably going to get hit from both sides. And he was able to deliver it really nicely. He got the ball where it needed to go, right on target as well, made the ball very catchable for a running back. That was a great throw. He had a few other ones, but that one really stood out to me because I think it speaks to what has been kind of the problem for Baylor's passing game this year, because he was able to get to that next read and then make that throw that gives you a 25-yard gain, a 30-yard gain to Bryson Washington. So that was a huge one. But yeah, sitting here, just kind of talking about this game and thinking about it more, what I've seen so far has been a Baylor team that in my eyes up front has blocked better in the passing game than they have in the run game. I know the run game was really good tonight, and maybe it's going to turn a corner, but through the first 2 games, it felt like they were more comfortable in pass protection. And if that is the case, then I don't understand how you could switch from Sawyer, because I do think Sawyer has proven kind of what he can do as a pocket passer and a guy who reads defenses well. And then also, he's an athletic guy too. He'll take advantage of opportunities as well there. So I was very impressed. I think this definitely gives you some hope about what this offense can be throughout the rest of this season. And it also gives you hope that Baylor's quarterback position maybe is going to take a turn the rest of this season.
Yeah. And one thing to note on his progressions, he was getting the ball out pretty quickly. There was a lot of design throws and getting into throws to get the ball out, but he had 2.25 seconds to get the ball out of his hand whenever he was in dropbacks. That's either to release the ball or if he was sacked or he ran by the time he crossed the line of scrimmage. So it all equates into it, but he was moving the ball really quickly out of the pocket, which benefits the offensive line when needed. That was not the case with DeQuan Finn in the first 2 games. He held on the ball a little bit longer for whatever reason. Obviously, you're playing a little bit tougher opponent against Utah. But Sawyer was able to move the ball, make the correct reads really fast. And all of that leads me into the running backs. And I know we're pretty excited about the emergence of Bryson Washington here, but I will say before we get into that, I feel like that the passing game helped this performance open up with the ball getting to the sidelines, kind of loosening that defense. And that's what Baylor needs. They need the ball to travel to the perimeter of the field, not even necessarily downfield shots. They just got to make more room for their running backs. But then you bring back Bryson Washington. And this to me is probably next to Sawyer, kind of this storyline that's emerging now with Bryson and also Dominic Richardson coming back. We've heard about his potential and his ability really dating back to his freshman year. He kind of dealt with some injuries, but then out of fall camp, it's kind of like he might be the number one running back. Well, then we don't see him for 2 games. We haven't seen him for whatever reason. Then he's immediately making an impact, over 100 yards, a touchdown, multiple runs. We're saying, okay, like there's something different about the way that he runs the football. Obviously, he's one of the guys that had a tough fumble that killed a Baylor drive. 4 opportunities, including a 4th down stop where Baylor just can't get it done in the first half. But I mean, this was something that Baylor has not seen really dating back to the 2022 season from any running back. It was very, very encouraging to watch him, especially as the passing game got going as well. I mean, to have both of them going at once was very encouraging.
Well, hopefully anyone who listens to this podcast or are on the Sikkim 365 side, we're not shocked by the fact that Bryson Washington performed as well as he did, because you and I have mentioned this pretty much all off season that, he's really coming along. He's a guy who had a great spring, had a great fall camp, continues to really impress. And it's really interesting because the staff was really excited about him in this inside zone scheme. And the previous staff was really excited about him for the wide zone scheme. And I think just in general, I think it's pretty clear that Bryson's just a really good running back. And there's a lot of things that he can do. But the main thing, and this is something that Dave Aranda mentioned, this is something that I think a lot of Baylor fans who have watched, Baylor's run game so far this year, it's probably left a little bit to be desired. But the ability to make people miss in space, when you're able to get through that first wave of the offensive line, can you make another guy miss so that you get a 10-yard gain? And then once you get the 10-yard gain, are you able to carry a defender for a few yards and get a first down? You know what I mean? Can you do those physical things? He's got all of that. And I think that's the difference between him and the other guys. He's got more wiggle, but also it's a wiggle mixed with physicality and this I want to run you over mentality, which, yes, it did lead to the fumble, but I think ultimately that benefits Baylor's offense greatly to have a guy like that because he's just different. The speed, the elusiveness, the wiggle, the power, it's all really there. And I think as this season progresses, I do believe they're going to lean on him a ton. I think they will give carries to other guys because I do think we even saw in this game, there are some other guys that you should still get the ball to. But I think in general, Bryson is going to be a huge focal point for this offense. They got something really special with him, and we kind of saw it coming, but it was really nice to see it on full display against a decent run defense.
Yeah, so redshirt freshman, man, he ran the wing T in high school at Franklin, won a state championship doing it. So you go back and watch his film and you're like, well, I don't really know. Like what is his strength? Like you knew he could kind of do everything, but how does it translate from a small school? You're running the wing T, what the wide zone scheme saw in him and what that coaching staff saw in him. But maybe it doesn't translate to this, but man, like in this particular game, the way, and I'll give a lot of credit to the offensive line. I thought they, especially in the second half, once they finally got in a groove offensively and Air Force just wasn't holding the ball the entire half and they were able to do what they wanted to do, kind of felt like this was the first half game plan. We just didn't get to do it. The offensive line did a really good job setting him up, but he made the net, they gave him 3 yards and then he's making that next. He's setting up the linebacker for a block. He's getting behind an offensive lineman and setting up that next burst. Even on his touchdown run, there might have been an opportunity for him just to run into the back of the offensive lineman, pick up 5, and it'd be over with. But he made the cut, got out around, and went and scored. And you saw that multiple times in the game, and it's always falling forward. You mentioned the 10-yard runs, and I'm kind of skipping over what I want to say about Dominic Richardson. But Dominic Richardson and Bryson combined for 5 runs of 10-plus yards in this game. Richard Reese had his 1. But before this game, Baylor running backs only had 2 runs this season of over 10 yards. And I think Dawson was obviously one. Richard had another one in another game. But they got 5 between those two in this game in the second half, basically. That was when they got them. And once the running game got going. And, like, that's what this offense needs, is that guy who can make the safety stress a little bit. They might not break everything, but those safeties are going to have to come downhill and make plays. That's going to help this offense, and it is going to feed off each other. And those two guys are going to be the ones those are the two that are built to do that in this offensive scheme.
They are. I still think you need to get the ball to Richard Reese, because as you saw in his touchdown run, when he's able to get the edge, he does have some nice speed, and he outran everyone. And that was great to see. I love seeing that for Richard Reese, but you're exactly right. I mean, Dominic Richardson brings a physicality. I still do not think he is 100% healthy. I just really don't. I think we saw this offseason, he was out, a bunch right before the season. And then you come into the season, he's missing games. I think he'll get there. I think he's going to get to kind of the place where he'll be more of a focal point early in games. Because really in this game, he didn't come in until the late in the third, something like that. And so I think that will be nice when he's kind of all the way back, getting kind of his full workload. But yeah, Bryson's a special player. You mentioned him at Franklin. He was my highest rated recruit in the 2023 class. And it's for this reason. He's got a lot of power. He's got a lot of wiggle. But because he was in that offense, you didn't really get to see it as much. It was more just like, hey, we're getting 10 yards here, 5 yards here, and then he'd break a 20-yard run. But it wasn't a lot of, 70-yard runs. It just really wasn't that. So you questioned his long speed and things like that. Those things really don't matter, as we saw with Abram Smith. If you're able to get those 20-yard gains, those are really what matter. You don't have to be a guy that's getting 70-yard touchdown runs. You really don't when you run this effectively. So that was great to see. He definitely takes this offense to another level. They ran for 6 yards per carry. Super impressive. Yes, we're talking about the running backs, but super impressive by the offensive line as well. They had their best performance by far this year. We mentioned coming into this game, I was a little skeptical about how good Air Force was stopping the run. When you give up 4.2 yards per carry to Merrimack, there's going to be some questions there. They just happen to play a San Jose State team that does not run the ball at all. They don't want to run the ball at all. So they play Baylor. Baylor's able to spread them out horizontally with these receivers and attack the mismatches. And once they started doing that consistently, Air Force just couldn't stack the box. And then there was really nothing they could do, because there was so much of a threat of getting beat over the top or getting beat in the pass game that it really hurt their run defense and allowed Baylor to really, I think, wear on them in the second half, which was very, very impressive.
Yeah, I mean, this offense is the way that Jake Spavital has built it, is to figure out what the defense is doing and then to adjust. A lot of it's pre-snap stuff, play calling, and obviously that's how all offenses work. But even within the play, and Sawyer making these calls, like it might be an RPO, and like he's making a decision in the moment of what's going on, and we have not seen it run the way it's supposed to be run until this point in the season. I don't care about the quality of competition, all those discussions. This is how it was supposed to look when we finally saw it look the way it was. And the running game was a big part of that in the second half. They just didn't have an opportunity to get it in the first half. I mean, the way that I'm sure there's game planning aspects from Air Force that eliminated that, but they just didn't have a lot of chances. When you're moving down the ball, when you're moving the field pretty easily, moving the ball down the field pretty easily, then you have immediate turnover. You don't even have the opportunity to run it in the red zone. And then Air Force had the ball for like 22 minutes in the first half or something. It might have been 25 minutes, and you just don't have an opportunity to. So I'm curious to see what happens this next week against Colorado. Offensive line wise, like I think that those guys are getting more comfortable, especially when you get 2 running backs back, including Dominic Richardson, who had 9 carries for 48 yards. And punishes guys. I think there's one play where he ran over 2 defenders, and that's just his brand of football. But both of those guys, Richardson and Washington, have that ability to kind of split that, get skinny, get between those. Maybe the hole's not huge, but they get there, and then they burst for 3 more yards, where it might have been a 2-yard gain. They just haven't had that. And you mentioned Richard Reese. They've needed him to do this in the first 2 games. And then finally you saw at the end of the game, after they had been pounding Washington and pounding Richardson, they got him on the edge, and the reaction from the Air Force defense was to suck in. And as soon as they did, he popped it to the outside and was gone. I'm interested to see what his real analytics speed was on that. If you don't follow that Twitter account, it's really cool. It's RA Analytics, at RA Analytics, and they track how fast guys are running in the games. He's had a couple opportunities that he's busted over 20 miles per hour. I wouldn't be surprised if he was in that range on that particular run. But they have a core group of running backs, including Dawson Pendergrass, who can move the football. And if this offensive line settles in, I'm excited to see him over the next few weeks. And you just hope they can build off this performance and not take a step back.
Exactly. And you want to see this run game continue to improve. Now, you're not going to get 6 yards per carry every game. You're going to have games where you're going to have to manufacture yards on the ground and just continue to churn them out. But I think overall, Bryson Washington gives them a much better opportunity to do that. And I was we saw this coming, but I couldn't have been more impressed. It was really something to see. And the touchdown you mentioned, I'm just going to be real. There's no other running back on this team that's scoring that touchdown. It's just the way it is. And these guys all have different skill sets, different strengths, but I think what Bryson Washington brings to them, they really need. And so very impressed by that. And I think it's something to build off of for sure.
Yeah. So obviously a lot of time on the offensive performance, I think that's kind of the storyline, but also, we can't overlook this defensive performance. And I have a different perspective on this. Obviously the first half, they struggled to get off the field, but again, 3 points allowed. Something I expected the defense to do is to limit Air Force. And I predicted them to score 3 points, but the way that they held them to 3 points, I was more surprised by and also encouraged by, because they were moving the ball. But then as soon as they got into the red zone or they got down the field, Baylor was able to get the stops that they needed. And obviously missed field goal happens, made one field goal. But I wanted to mention this. Coach Aranda mentioned that Air Force used some new looks in the first half that they kind of had to adjust to allow them to get some first downs. And I don't know that Baylor's defense in 2023 and really at the end of 2022 would have adjusted the way that this defense did. One, to settle down as Air Force is moving the ball, but then just to make the adjustments and basically eliminate everything in the second half. That's where my discretion and my encouragement for this particular unit is, because maybe it's not that impressive on the surface of what they did, but the way that they met the challenge, accepted it, and then bounced back almost immediately was the most encouraging thing for me.
If I'm going to look at it from an encouraging standpoint, that would definitely be it as well. They really, again, when they had an opportunity to get off the field and it was going to lead to points, they were able to do that. And that was the key for them, towards the end of this game. Now, I will say this, Dave Aranda gave, I think, probably one of the most emphatic speeches I've ever seen him make. I was standing there just kind of watching, and he got the whole defense around him, and he was just laying into these guys, and he was not happy. And truthfully, I don't think anyone in that stadium could have been happy with the way that they were playing, because simply put, we looked into the second half and you just sit there and go, okay, why were they not doing this in the first half? And yes, adjustments are a part of that. But I would also say this was a team that I think did very similarly to what they did in Utah. They showed up a little bit too pumped up, a little bit too excited, a little bit too, trying to make the big play. And they got hit from some counters by Air Force, some things that Air Force was able to bring to the table to take advantage of that aggressiveness. And it led to, I think at one point in the second quarter, Air Force was running for 5.5 yards per carry. They were getting chunk plays. They were moving the football. And truthfully, Baylor very lucky to only give up 3 points in that first half. It could have easily been 10. It could have easily been probably 10, maybe a little bit more than that, but 10 probably would have been a number that I would have said that made a lot of sense. They felt like they were, scoring 10 points in that first half. And on the Baylor side, it felt like Baylor scored 21 points in the first half. The scoreboard just didn't look like that. And so I think my overall takeaway was, coming into this game, I felt like Dave Aranda's plan was to cause a bunch of 3-and-outs and to get the offense the ball and to score a lot of points and to really take this game over early on. Yeah. That didn't happen. And that is still something that I think is a question and a bit of a concern, because you would like them to, when they say they're going to go in and do this, that they accomplish it immediately. But I do agree with you. In the second half, they did an outstanding job of adjusting. And really, I think more than that, it was just a mentality and a focus thing. And I think Dave Aranda really just said it to him, was very honest with him, and got the response that you want to see. And truthfully, that's what great coaches do. And that's exactly what he did. So I was very impressed by that. It was something that was very needed. And it was something that I think was great to see because it wasn't good enough for him. And he made it very clear, and then they fixed it.
Yeah. And I think that's where our thoughts kind of correlate, because I don't think this team gives that response in a previous season. Dating back to 21, I think 22 and 23, there's maybe some variance in 22. I don't think that happens before this season. And I think maybe a lot of it has to do with Dave Aranda kind of lighting that fire. But I think what we've seen from this team, they're willing to play physical, they're willing to play fast, is reining that in and honing it in and playing assignment football. And just not getting out over your skis, just play football, do your 111th, but also play with that edge and physicality. Because there's guys that even in that first drive of the game where Air Force goes down, they basically had them at a 3-and-out, and then Air Force goes for it, can't get it. They had them on a third down stop, couldn't get the third down stop later on. So they had their opportunities, and then that almost set the tone for that first half, that first fourth down conversion. Because from then on, Baylor just was like on their heels in a lot of ways. And I know that Coach Aranda mentioned it. They gave him some new looks, but it was just like, okay, we got to figure out how to get off the field, but we're not able to do it for whatever reason. But then they make a first down play where they just crush everybody. And then the second down play, they get back to third and short. And so I think there's this back and forth ping pong effect that they were never able to settle in. And I think to an extent, Cooper Lands is out. DK Kalu gets a start at nose tackle. Linus Noel, for whatever reason, wasn't playing in the first half at nose tackle. And they were just getting pummeled there in the interior of the line. I mean, it's almost reflective of last year when Baylor didn't have a nose tackle. They were just like, there was a quarterback sneak where there was no push at all early in that game. And so I think there was some of that going on. But at the same time, this defense just needed to go out and take it. They didn't do it in the first half. The second half, they literally went out and took it from Air Force. Air Force, I don't even know what the total numbers were in the second half for Air Force, but it was minimal across the board until late. And I think at the counter of that too, Baylor really did flip the script from a time of possession standpoint in the second half because they ran the football so well. And that was an encouraging thing to see. They were able to get off the field defensively. Offensively, they ran the ball well. And we haven't seen that combination really since the early 22 season. And truthfully, obviously, since the 21 season.
Right. 4 3-play drives, if you include the 4-play drive that was a turnover on downs for Air Force. So 4 of those. And that is literally exactly what Dave Aranda was saying. You got to be able to get off field in the first half. You're exactly right. I mean, if you're going to give Air Force 3rd and 2, you're done. I mean, they're going to, 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, you're done. They're going to QB sneak it twice, and you're not stopping that. I don't care who you are. It's going to be really difficult to stop that. And so it's important starting on the early downs. But like you said, Air Force hit them with some counters. They were able to take advantage of some things. I do want to mention here, they missed Cooper Lands. They did miss him. Yeah. He's a guy that they're going to need back if they want to reach their ultimate goals. He's been their best nose tackle so far this year, most consistent. So they're going to need him back. Jackie Marshall continues to just be phenomenal. And he left the game at one point, and I'm just sitting there like, oh no. Because they really need him. He's been playing so well. I mean, PFF grades, amazing. Eye test, amazing. Stats, really good as well. So been very impressed with him. I was just impressed by the overall defense just adjusting. The other thing that Dave Aranda did say he wanted to do this week was get more guys in and hopefully be able to allow the starters to rest a little bit just so that as you get to the end of games, those guys are fresh. And they were able to do that in this game. We saw a lot of Ra Dilworth, who was actually their highest graded defensive player on PFF. Now, he only played like 9 snaps, but still highest graded. Kylan Reed played a lot, the true freshman. I think he's really kind of leaning in to a true backup role. I think it was very encouraging to see all of that. I will also say that I could be remembering this wrong, but I remember I just seem to recall when they played Air Force in Fort Worth, the safeties just had a terrible day. I mean, it was cold. The defensive line was allowing running backs to get to the second level. It felt like we were just watching the safeties, get dragged by running backs the entire day. Yeah. And they responded. I mean, Devin Lemire and Devin Bobby were fantastic. Corey Gordon came in there and just was running around with his hair on fire. I was so impressed with the safeties in this game. I think Devin Lemire also broke up what would have been like a 40-yard pass play deep downfield, one of the only shots Air Force really took. So I was impressed by that group. They took this personal and they really responded well, which was something I think I needed to see from them, especially in a game where you're getting challenged physically like they were. They responded. They're going to get challenged in a totally different way this upcoming week. But I do think they held up very nicely against a very physical team.
Yeah. I mean, that's been the theme with this defense specifically in 3 games. There's not been a moment when I thought this team is not physical enough defensively. Like, I mean, from every single level, and you have to have that. Like and you mentioned it for this particular game, the safeties did that and it stood out, which they're allowed a little bit more freedom when they read run and not pass, they're coming downhill. But you saw how physical they're willing to play. I would say Devin Bobby of the 3 playing that position, the deep safety that are really playing the most, he's everywhere. I mean, he's like, if he reads run and he's right, he's coming in with bad intentions. And that's, I mean, you have to have an enforcer like that playing the safety position. I'm really hoping that they get Carl Williams back this weekend, but Kendrick Simpkins has done a fair job there. You're not seeing him blow assignments, which is key for that position. He can kind of do a little bit of everything. And overall, man, like you mentioned, the backups playing, like there were some times like Brooks Miller had a great play. We mentioned DK playing the nose tackle position. Devontae Tezeno was played at a pretty high level for his limited snaps back from injury. So they're getting depth there. And I think this staff has done a good job of allowing guys to get healthy, but also playing them. I mean, just like we saw with Dominic Richards on the offensive side of the ball, like he's getting kind of eased back in to see, hey, what can you do? Let's not rush it too quick. And they haven't had to. Defensive line is that very much. And Cooper Lands, you just hope he's back for this weekend. Different set of challenges. That defensive line is going to have to play a little bit different or a lot different against Colorado this weekend. But with all that said, I think we do need to mention special teams really quick in a different way. No punts, which is awesome to see. I think I don't know if that's happened since 21 at the latest. It definitely didn't happen last year or maybe even in 22. And then Isaiah Hankins hitting 3 field goals. Once again, like he seems pretty steady right now. You know, with kickers, you never know, but he's been very steady. He did miss the one late. And almost like he relaxed because like that wasn't, fully expecting him to make it. You're up big late. And he misses the field goal. But overall, I mean, coverage has been great. When you're not having to punt coverage, it's really great, but kickoff coverage has been good, kicking out of the back of the end zone, just not giving those opportunities. And if that phase can play well, it helps the defense, and the offense has a little, they can not stress as much. If they do have a 3-and-out, you have the opportunity to flip the field from the punting position.
Yeah, and they continue to be really good on special teams, which, you know, I know they've invested a lot in that. Dave Aranda has, to make sure that unit does well. They got some good coaches in there, Ryan Pollard, and, you know, Matthew Pallage's influence, I feel like, is somewhat felt there as well. I got to give a huge shout out. So I went into this game, and Baylor always releases, you know, a graphic for who the captains are for the game. And I felt like this was just a cool story. So Caleb Parker was one of the captains going into this game. And I was like, okay, that's cool. He's played a little bit. People have noticed that he's been playing some star. I think he's probably the third string star right now with Carl out. So he's been coming in, playing a little bit. And he comes in and he blocks the punt, which should have been returned for a touchdown. Josh White's got to be kicking himself because I was like, oh my gosh, he's about to score a touchdown, but he fell on it. Great. They're able to get the big play, but Caleb Parker's the one who blocked it. And then he had a great tackle on a guy too. I don't know if the guy was jumping or what, but Caleb caught him in the air and really punished him. So I just thought it was a really cool performance by him to be named captain and then come out and have that kind of influence. He's been a guy that's made an impact this year in whatever way that he can. So definitely got to give a shout out to the walk-ons, you know, when they make a big moment like that. Yeah, no, definitely. And I would say old school walk-on Josh Cameron had a great game offensively. So two walk-ons there having big impacts in a lot of different ways. And I will say with Caleb, man, he seems to be around the ball. Every time he's in the game, like he's there. He knows where he's supposed to be, and he's very physical as well. And I think that's probably maybe why he had this role in this particular game. It's like, hey, we need you to be physical. You're not going to have much, you know, coverage responsibilities. Go down there, play fast. And I think that the play that you're talking about where he caught the guy in the air and finished him off, I think that was a 3rd down play too. Or at least an important play to keep them from getting a first down. So
overall, encouraging performance. You just want to see it continue. There's stuff to build off of. You want to avoid setbacks. You don't want them to go out against Colorado and everything they did well this weekend to struggle with. We don't know the status of DeQuan Finn. Obviously, day to day at quarterback, even if he's healthy, I'm curious the direction they go with that. But I will say, going back to the offense, and I'll wrap it up with this, but there's still a role for DeQuan Finn because of his speed and athletic ability, whatever happens the rest of the season. Like, he's going to have an opportunity to make a big play for this team. And I don't know, I'm not saying that because I know what direction everything's going, but he can be valuable whatever happens. And I think Baylor right now is in a good position at quarterback, knowing, hey, we've seen what DeQuan can do with his feet. We've seen what Sawyer can do in the past game. And I'm anxious to see overall what they decide to do at the quarterback position once he's healthy, because it's obviously going to be a big part of the rest of the season.
Whoever the backup quarterback is has to stay ready. Sawyer was very ready for this moment. He capitalized on that moment because he just stayed ready. And he did that all last year too. And so if Finn comes back, whenever he does come back, if he is the backup, they need him to stay ready. Because they're probably going to we're probably going to see both of these guys, at some point going forward, regardless of who is the starter for the Colorado game. And so I think that is an important piece of the puzzle. And I think in general, I feel good about where Baylor's quarterback position is heading now, but they need to make sure that all stays together. Everything stays cohesive with those two guys, and that regardless of who gets the starting role, who gets the backup role, everyone is still locked in for that common goal. Because I do think, as this season progresses, what we've seen so far, there's a lot of winnable games for Baylor going forward. So they really need to keep this team united, keep it together. And if they're able to do that and build off this performance, there could be quite a few more wins to come.
Yeah. All right, Baylor family. That's going to do it for today's episode of Inside Baylor Sports, the official daily podcast of Baylor Athletics. Thanks to each of you for listening. For Grayson, I'm Colt. Have a great Monday, and Sick 'em Bears.